Yes, Vidisha, you
Good
can
evening.
start.
Good evening, friends. This is
Uh,
Preeti Savla, chairperson of Women and Young Members Excellence Committee, welcoming all of you, the participants. And today's series, this is the third session, I understand, for this symposium. And today we have very important topic with us, along with very important speaker. So that is the most important topic, which has recently announced mandatorily by Ministry of Corporate Affairs for mandatory audit trail for all the private limited companies and all the companies, even listed companies and all the companies. And audit trail and maximum of our SMPs and small and medium business houses are actually using Tally as their accounting software. And that is why we thought, okay, let us begin this for our young chartered accountants this session. The young chartered accountants, whether they are in the practice or whether they are in the accounting field at the corporates, this will be useful for all of you. And that is why we have kept thinking the importance of the time and the announcement of the mandatory audit trail. And CA Henixa has already taken the expert in the accounting software and has already taken this session earlier also. So we thought, okay, let us have this session by him. So we are thankful to all our moderators, CA Hiral Shah, CA Litesh Gada, CA Dipesh Shah, CA Vidisha Shah, for coordinating for this symposium. And we will not begin this kind of symposium and complete successfully without the support of our very handsome Vice Chairman, CA Abhay Chatterjee. So,
Thank
yeah, and all my young, dear participants, we have about more than 1,000 participants have already joined. And being this the most important topic, we are also coming now with the topic of the opportunities in UAE and all these areas. So the next session will be like on those topics. So this is our endeavor to serve the best to our young uh, brigadier of our fraternity. So with these words, once again, I welcome all of you. And now I give baton to Abhayji to share his words of wisdom.
thank you. Thank you very much, Preeti Ben. Actually, it's always an honor, privilege, and I think under your chairperson, I would say as a chairmanship of this very important Women and Young Members Excellence Committee, an initiative taken when you now have young members also part of this very important committee, and having these symposiums once a week again, it's so good that a lot of learning is there for members, especially who are young and who are come into practice or not even in practice, otherwise who've come into job and looking for opportunities elsewhere, or want to know, what are the new areas of practice which is coming in with someone like Henik Shah, who's there, who's into software IT, who's also into audits, and then of course Hiral Shah, Vidisha, she's been the moderator today, Dipesh, and of course the office. So once again, I welcome on behalf of this Women and Young Members Excellence Committee all of you, and thank you, Preeti Ben, for always being a big support for any events being organized under this committee or otherwise in other committees also. So I think you already spoke about the importance of this topic, I think, and I would say that at the right time of the year, because when we say that has become mandatory from 1st April 2023, now it's so important for companies to ensure it is there, for auditors to report if it is not there. Because for auditors, it was even there, and I'm sure Henrik will cover that, because auditors 22-23, how they have to deal with it in their audit report, where they have to report under the Rule 11G, which I'm sure will be covered by Henrik, how it has to be reported in 23-24. Of course, it will be coming after the year end of 24, but as the audit progress for 23, even the client has to ensure that the audit trail is implemented. There is an edit log, whether I use a software or I use a tally software, whether I would say ERP 9 we've been using for last so many years. Now we have to shift to Prime because Prime probably has the facility. Henrik, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere, please, and I'm sure you'll cover that. But
Yes,
Prime
yes.
actually has the facility. So, as an auditor, we must ensure that the software which has been used by the management has an edit log which is available each time. An edit log I don't need to define because it talks about any backdated entries or any exceptional thing which is done in the software is being captured by this audit trail by the edit log and is available to the auditors whenever they want to see. And if not available, then definitely for us as an auditor, we have to report in the audit report, which is applicable from 22-23 also, and going forward, it has become applicable under Rule 11G. You have to report. So I think that part, of course, will be taken care. And thanks, Hanik, for sparing your time today and making yourself available for this important session. Just to quickly add on, Preeti mentioned about all companies. Good thing is not applicable to LLPs and non-profit organizations, but Section 8 companies or companies under 25 earlier Companies Act, it is applicable. So everybody have to make sure that it is there in their software, whichever being used. So you don't have a choice. And I'm sure you'll, as an auditor, you'll take care your client is using a software which has an audit trail. So, and thank you so much again, Preeti Ben, for giving me this opportunity. And any member who's I'm sure who'd be keen to participate, maybe as a moderator, maybe as a speaker in this symposium, would be very happy that they can come forward, they can share their experiences, opportunities for other young members, how we can connect, create a networking among young members, so that wherever there are small cities, small partnership firms, small practitioners who miss the opportunity of large cities, large organizations doing audits. So I think there we can connect each other well. So I wish each one of you a great success for this today's symposium. And thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of weekly programs, interesting programs under the chairpersonship of Preeti Ben and myself, of course, being the vice chairman. And office will take care. And any issue, please feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you so much. Again, Preeti Ben, giving me this opportunity. And over to you, Vidisha, to take this symposium forward.
So before Vidisha takes up, let me also, a lot of time Vice Chairman is saying under the chairmanship. So it is the joint chairmanship, I can say that. Because we are doing the equal work and with the support of our coordinators and also with the support of office who is, working very hard, Shanu, Ruchi and Jaya. So my compliments to office also. So, so let us have the session to begin with, and I wish all of you happy learning. Over to Vidisha.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Hi, good evening, everyone. I am CA Vidisha Shah and moderator for this session, and I'm thrilled to be moderator for this session under the guidance of Preeti ma'am and Abhay sir. Before we invite CA Henrik sir to continue this session, I would like to share a few points about him with all of us. CA Henrik is a practicing chartered accountant at Henrik Dilip and Hiral at Henrik Hiral and Company. He is a practicing chartered accountant and his core area of practice include audit automation and taxation. He is one of the few people who understand Tally definition language, which is used to customize Tally software. So we can understand how great his knowledge will be and how important points and everything will be shared with all of us. So now I invite CA Henrik Shah to conduct this session. Handing over to you, CA Henrik.
Sure. I'll just share my screen. It's okay. So, yes. Is my screen visible?
Yes,
Yes.
it's visible.
Yes.
So before I begin with my session, I just giving a few appreciations. So appreciating CA Preeti Savla, CA Abhay Chhajar, who I just recently introduced for his kind words, CA Gautam Mota, Ruchi Gupta, and the entire team of Women and Young Members Excellence Committee for this opportunity. I also appreciate CA Vidisha Shah for her kind introduction. So this is a pretty hot topic, as Abhay sir correctly mentioned, because this thing has been implemented right from 1st of April, and the companies are yet to warm up to this requirement. So basically, what my experience says while dealing with the management of certain companies, especially at MSME levels, is one very basic question, and that is, what is the use? What is their benefit? As in, from the use from the company's perspective, what is their benefit? The only benefit which I would see in this thing is that it kind of creates a responsibility on the users, that is the people who are entering those transactions, and the people who are, say for example, altering those transactions, or maybe under internal controls checking those transactions. Okay, so we begin with the topic: audit trail, issues in reporting and implementation, with practical demonstrations in Tally Prime. Always, whenever there is a law plus technology session, I always prefer to say this thing, that technology is something which is kind of a team effort. Everybody would be knowing something, and together as a collective, when all the pieces of the puzzle of technology are together, that is how we complete our tasks with ease. We begin with it. What is audit trail? See, the first very basic question that comes, as a CA, as an auditor, is that, is the term audit trail defined under company law? So if anybody can say, is it defined, or where is it defined? Because the thing is, the very term audit trail as such is not defined in law. However, the way they have drafted the requirement, wherein under Rule 3 for the accounting side, or the 11G for the auditors, we can have an idea of what is the exact requirement of what they call under audit trail. For majority aspects of this session, I have relied extensively on the implementation guide, which was recently launched by the Accounting and Auditing Standards Board. And it is a well-written implementation guide for all the participants over here. I would strongly advise to go through that guide. For majority of your questions relating to reporting, the guide is like the holy grail, the holy book, and it is covered. Things are covered over there. So even in the implementation guide, the term as such, obviously they give an explanation as to what is audit trail, but there is no definition of the audit trail. So if you go by the implementation guide, the first thing that I came across was a footnote. What it mentioned was the term audit trail, edit log, or audit log are used interchangeably. This is what happens when there is no statute, like statutory definition. So whenever even we from the technical side mention audit trail, what we mean is audit trail, edit log, or audit log. These words are used interchangeably. However, in one of the, I should say, YouTube videos, an informative YouTube video which I was watching of one of the chartered accountants, and this is just a screenshot of that video, he has tried to sort of define that it is a chronological sequence of the history of a particular transaction, tracking who has created or changed it, that is altered, a record, what record and what time. Now, what record? This is very interesting. I'll tell you why. See, because when we say, the guidance note, as to how the guidance note has tried to sort of explain it to the users that what is audit trail, records maintained as audit trail may include. The guidance note is clearly saying may include, okay, when the changes were made, that is the date and time. Who made the changes? That is user. What data was changed? In the earlier definition, or like the definition of the earlier slide, the word which was used was what record, and over here, what the terms which have been used is what data was changed. Now understand over here. See, the thing is that audit trail in itself is a record of the transactions which are accounted for, be it Tally, be it any other software. Transaction is a record. So record of a record. Audit trail is record of a transaction. Transaction is a record, audit trail is a record of a record. Okay, now in that audit trail record, what records? It's a tongue twister, but what records need to be mentioned in the audit trail? That is where, there can be a difference of opinions because audit trail as such is not defined. Okay, that is what you have covered. That is what record or what data was changed. That is what the thing is. Like, either do we refer to the transaction that was changed or the contents of the transaction that were altered or changed, as the case may be. We'll take this thing ahead, the management as the implementer. So what happens is, obviously maintenance and implementation of the audit trail is the responsibility of the management of the company. As an auditor, our duty is to report on the efficiency and effectiveness of the audit trail. However, many chartered accountants also act as an advisor, as a legal advisor or as a compliance advisor to the various companies, to the management. So from that perspective also, let's try to cover. Rule 3, basically, of the company's accounts rules begins with a manner of books of accounts to be kept in electronic mode. So basically, we are covering the electronic medium of management of books of accounts, not the physical medium, in case if somebody is still using your ledger books and your registers and all of that, physical registers and all of that. Okay. So the proviso now which states is that provided for the financial year commencing on or after the first day of 1st April 2023, every company, very clear, every company which is using an accounting software for maintenance of its books of accounts shall use only such. They're not giving an option to use such or other. Only such accounting software which has a feature of recording audit trail of each and every transaction, creating an edit log of the change made in account. They are not really clarifying what type of change, but just change made in account, along with the date when such changes were made, and ensuring that the audit trail cannot be disabled. So to ensure that the audit trail cannot be disabled rests with the management. Okay, as an implementer. Every company, as Abhay sir correctly mentioned, whether a Section 8 companies or foreign companies or private companies registered under the 1956 Act or the 2013 Act, the reality is all are covered, irrespective of the turnover, irrespective of the property, plant and equipment, as certain turnover limits are mentioned in your MSME laws or maybe under GST for e-invoicing and everything. No such thing exists in the company law for this requirement. All are covered. They should just be registered under the Companies Act. Be it one transaction, be it multiple transactions, irrelevant. Just food for thought for everybody. Are shell companies covered? The reality is that shell companies are simply not defined under company law, hence they're not covered. Okay, let's take it ahead. Shall use only such. What if the accounting software currently, or say for example, you're using an older version of Tally, maybe Tally ERP or maybe Tally Prime, but earlier to 2.1 version, doesn't have the log recording functionality, then what? We'll be covering this question in the later slides. Each change made along with the date. So again, I go back to my the earlier explanation that I gave. What type of changes? Do we as an auditor or as a system implementer, do we have to see whether the audit trail covers transactions, and that is, it shows that the transactions have been altered, or whether it should cover that what alterations have been made in that transaction? Cannot be disabled. Except for representation, how to ensure this? Now, except for representation, I have not used the word management representation over here. For a simple reason that what happens is, as a system implementer or as an advisor to the management or as an auditor, the thing is that we will have to rely much on what the software providers tell us. Any software provider, any ERP or accounting software provider, if they say it cannot be disabled, obviously we'll be using our audit procedures or just analytical procedures to see whether it can be disabled or not. But we'll be using our analytical skills, not really skills wherein we're trying to circumvent or evade controls, right? So except for representation from the software provider, which the management will sort of accept the representation of the software provider, how do we ensure this? This is a burning question, of which the answers are really difficult to find. Although we'll be trying to cover certain aspects of this enability as well as disability. Okay, now we come to the reporting side of it. That is the auditor. See, now for the auditor side of it, the rule is Rule 11, which begins with other matters to be included in the auditor's report. And in that, they introduced a rule, that is Rule 11G, which states whether the company in respect of any financial year commencing on or after 1st April 2022, and later on they kind of postponed the requirement to 2023, has used such accounting software for maintaining its books of accounts, which has a feature of recording the audit trail or edit log, and the same has been operated throughout the year for all transactions, and the audit trail feature has not been tampered with. This is very important, not being tampered with, because as an auditor, how do I ensure that it has not been tampered with, and what does the law mean when it says tampering? And the audit trail has been preserved by the company as per the statutory requirements for record retention. The statutory requirements are, I guess, 8 years. Okay. So, record of audit trail operated throughout the year. What about the time when the trail was not implemented? So what happens is, imagine a scenario, since 1st April, this requirement is applicable. However, the companies are kind of warming up. So maybe within a few days or a few weeks, they will implement the audit trail, after understanding everything, how the system works and everything. So for the first 15-20 days, this would be an issue. Furthermore, what if the companies are like, let's see whether we shouldn't really implement, or maybe, after a few months or something. So there is always this question. Okay. And on that thing, how do as an auditor, we report that for a certain period of time, even though there was a statutory requirement, yet the audit trail for this particular company was not enabled. Okay. How do we verify operation ability? Now, the problem over here is operation ability is something which is a on-time, regular time, daily feature. As in, whenever the software is kind of started, wherever the transactions are happening or they're being entered. The thing is, how do, as an auditor, which probably comes after a particular period of time, say for example, maybe 3 months or 6 months, or maybe after a year. So how do we ensure that it was operational throughout the year and that it has not been disabled for some period of time? For all transactions recorded. Firstly, what do we mean when we say a transaction? So understand what happens over here is, I'll just take you through the definition of the books of accounts. So what does it say? The books of accounts includes records maintained, includes. First things first, it says includes. It doesn't say mean. So this is an inclusive definition. So books of accounts includes all sums of money received and expended. Okay, all sales and purchases of goods and services, assets and liabilities, and cost records as may be defined. So basically, now coming back to my presentation. So basically, transaction as such refers to only those transactions which form a part of the books of accounts. So if you ask me, say for example, in Tally or any other software, creation of a new ledger, in Tally we call it masters. So creation of a new ledger master, or creation of a new stock master, or creation of a new user who will be, say for example, entering a transaction into Tally. So is that called a transaction for the purposes of audit trail? The answer is no. Transaction is anything which forms a part of your books of accounts, as simple as that. So the immediate next question which comes up is that, is stock journal, say for example, we're doing process accounting, or payroll, that is salaried people's accounting, or all those things. Say for example, maybe, In case of journals that we do, the stock journals and everything, we're doing accounting for normal losses, we're doing for abnormal losses as well. That is purely stock records, inventory. So do they also form a part of the transaction? If you ask me, yes, I believe they form a part of the books of accounts, and hence they form a part of the transactions recorded for audit trail purposes. Okay. Feature has not been tampered with. Now, this is something which raised eyebrows even while I was reading the implementation guide and the amendment that had been made in law. Because the thing is, when you say tampered, when you say the word tampered, what do you actually mean? Tampering, this is Oxford language, I suppose, Oxford dictionary. Tampering, what does tampering mean? Is that interfere with something in order to cause damage or make unauthorized alterations. Now, edit log or any other such facility which comes with the software directly, interfere with something would mean interfering with the code of it. That is something which, as an auditor, we are not in a position to understand whether somebody has tampered with the source code or anything of that edit log or that audit trail. Because obviously, any software provider is not going to release its source code for everybody, right? It doesn't work that way. So tampering is always something which is going to cause problems, like exactly what and how. Okay, let's come back to the presentation. An auditor has to report on this audit trail, which is fundamentally a technical thing. Auditor, as we view audit traditionally, it is a finance audit. We have to say whether the books of accounts or whether the financial statements are showing a true and fair view of the affairs of the company. That is what the mindset is from an audit standpoint. And the audit trail feature has not been tampered with. It's technical, not financial. And therefore, what I personally feel is that this is something that as an auditor, as a reporter on financial statements, we might look up to. That is use of the work of an expert, auditor's expert. Or whether will the work of an expert needed to report on this audit trail? Well, it depends on the professional judgment and obviously, the kind of auditee, the complexity of the accounts of the auditee. But this is a possibility. In case if this comes up, then the reporting will be that the auditor has to refer to the report of the expert only when such reference is relevant to the understanding of a modification to the auditor's opinion. So when the auditor is modifying an opinion, at that point of time, the auditor may refer to the expert's report. Okay. Also, the auditor needs to indicate the fact that the expert's opinion does not reduce the auditor's responsibility on her opinion. Okay. Just one thing that everybody should take care of in case you're going for SA 620, that is your communication with the expert should include an inquiry regarding the interest and relationship of that expert with the company and also of that expert in general for its objectivity or integrity. That is something that we need to take care of. Auditor's responsibility. So when I started, reading the guidance note and understanding, because see, the thing is, we need to understand that audit trail is not defined. We need to understand that the technical aspect, that is the tampering and everything, is something which is beyond our control. So exactly when we start reporting, what is our actual exact responsibility and what do we see if, from an audit evidence perspective, what do we actually see and how do we actually take care of it? So the guidance note, one of the footnotes that I found in the guidance note, that is the implementation guide, is that the auditor's responsibility under the audit rules, that is this rule, is restricted to transactions which have been recorded and subsequent changes have been made to those transactions. So the responsibility is on the changes, for the transactions on which changes have been made. Again, what changes have been made should, as an auditor, we ask the management, or should from a compliance, compliance professional, wherein we are advising the clients on compliance side of things, are we expected to advise the management that they should be maintaining a trail wherein the reasons should be mentioned, that as to why some transaction has been altered? as I mentioned, whether the auditor has to report that the audit trail has captured the changes have been made, or auditor has to include in its scope what changes have been made. So a transaction has been altered. The audit trail says that, yes, this transaction has been altered. That is one interpretation. The other interpretation is that what changes exactly if the transaction has been altered. So say, for example, a ledger has been changed or some amount has been changed, or what has been changed. Should the auditor or should the system compliance advisor take care of that thing or not? This is a big, fundamentally a very big question which people don't really, take care of. What ifs? So basically on this side, I have tried to cover certain, frequently asked questions type, which I've been asked or other people are asked, other professionals are asked, like what ifs? Okay, let's begin with the first question. What if books of accounts are maintained physically in a non-computerized mode? See, understand with the complex requirements under GST or say, for example, income tax or MSME or any other law or including the Companies Act also, if India's and everything are applicable. Practically speaking, physical maintenance of books of accounts is not really feasible. However, to answer this question, the books of accounts can be maintained physically because there is no statutory obligation to maintain books of accounts in an electronic or computerized mode. And if the books of accounts are maintained physically, the question of audit trail does not arise. What if the company is using point of sale softwares or inventory management softwares? So what happens is, in multiple companies, be it small scale, large scale, irrelevant. Actually, the scale is irrelevant. What happens is if, say, for example, the company is into retail. So many retail companies use point of sale softwares. For example, you swipe that card. Or for example, you must have seen in your supermarkets wherein they just using your barcode scanners and just entering the transactions into the billing softwares, and the billing software generates that long bill which they give it to you, and then obviously the transaction is complete. You carry your goods and leave. So those type of softwares or inventory management software, say for example your companies where in this factory where there's processes which are happening, or say for example warehousing, your e-commerce companies and everything which use extensive inventory management softwares. So is the audit trail applicable only to your accounting software, or is the audit trail applicable to your all other softwares wherein such data is mentioned? To answer this question, I'll again go back to the explanation which I gave when I said what is a transaction. So a transaction for which audit trail needs to be mentioned is a transaction which is covered under the definition of books of accounts. So is a point of sale, the transactions which are recorded in a point of sale software, are they covered to be a part of the books of accounts? The answer is yes. The inventory management softwares, are they covered to be a part of the books of accounts? The answer is yes. So when the answer is yes, audit trail becomes applicable to all these softwares as well. Whether backdated transactions need to be entered. What if the backdated transactions need to be entered? So I'll just give you multiple examples. What happens is many a times the records are just being maintained, say for example in Excel or something, and then after a point of time the records are entered into your accounting software or Tally or whatever. Maybe many people might be using special utilities which are available in the market which help to import the data from Excel or maybe a third-party software or whatever. So what happens is, after a period of time, say for example a month or so, you would be simply importing those transactions from a technical standpoint, entering those transactions or creating those vouchers in a Tally or any other software. But from a practical perspective, obviously it's a backdated entry because the transaction has happened a few days ago and you're collecting those periodic transactions and entering into it. So what if the backdated transactions are to be entered? Is the audit trail applicable, and what will happen? Okay. So when you read the implementation guide or even the notification that has come up, the notification as well as the implementation guide, they clearly say that an audit trail needs to be mentioned, needs to be maintained. That's it. The implementation, both of these documents don't really speak anything about whether the transaction is being entered today, it should have been entered today, or it should have been entered a few days ago, or a few weeks ago, or a few months ago. No, nothing like that requirement has been mentioned. However, the thing which needs to be taken care of is that compliance of other laws and, say, for example, accounting standards or maybe Ind AS. What happens is, I'll give you a very basic example. In case of GST, the sales invoice needs to be issued on or at the before or at the time of removal of goods, in case if it's a transaction dealing with goods. Okay. So what happens is the invoice date should be when the goods are being moved out of the factory or at the premise of the supplier, that is the seller. And if they are using some other software, maybe for just invoicing, and then they kind of import their transactions into the accounting software, the validity, the legal validity of backdated transaction is yes, the backdated transactions are legal. What will happen is, in your accounting software, the log will be created such when you have imported the transaction into that accounting software. And the other software, which is your billing software, in that the audit trail would be such that when the bill as in the tax invoice was created. Policies related to backup are unclear. So what happens is, I'll again go back to this thing. Okay. So, the company law, the rules, the accounting rules to the company law, this is Rule 3, Sub-Rule 5, and the proviso to it. What it clearly mentions is that the backup of books of accounts and other documents maintained in electronic mode. Over here also, the requirement for backup is on electronic mode. Whether it is outside India also, if any, shall be kept in servers. Servers is your hard disks and your computers and everything, physically located in India and on a daily basis. This is very important. And on a daily basis. So what happens is, your backup policies should be such that daily backups are there. The audit trail will also be a part of the backup on that daily basis. Okay. Again, coming back to the PPT. So policies relating to backup are unclear. What will happen is, it kind of affects your reporting on the audit trail, because you cannot really, from an audit standpoint, you cannot really vouch for the efficiency of this control, that is the audit trail. Now, what if the GST or income tax officers ask for an auditor? Say, for example, in a search or a survey operation, which is happening, obviously those officers have got the right to access your books of accounts. And then they see that, then they ask for that audit trail, or then they see. Because personally, if you ask me, yes, this is a very practical possibility which can come up. And again, I'll go back to my initial like the explanation which I gave 5 minutes ago in relation to sales transactions. Say, because as I said, GST, you have to issue your invoice at the time or before the removal of goods. So what if in the audit trail, the officer finds out that you have issued the invoice belatedly? These are ifs. We don't know. Time will tell what the officers interpret of such requirements. So if if anybody has any questions or something, we'll be taking it up at the end of the session. Okay, I'll be specifically asking if anybody has any questions. At that point of time, we can take it up. Technicalities. Basically, the technical issues, as in I would rather say scenarios which we have come across while implementing audit trail, and certain people who are more into how do we sort of ensure that we are compliant, at least seemingly compliant to the audit trail requirement under company law. But before I jump into technicalities, let me give a disclaimer, and that is, I don't intend to favor or defame any ERP accounting software providers. Okay, nobody has paid me or anything. I'm not promoting any software over here. This is just an attempt to highlight the technicalities, which as an auditor, as the management, as a person who is consulting, may come across while implementing and reporting on the audit trail. So initially for our discussion, what we'll do is we'll refer to these two softwares, Tally Prime release 2.1 and Tally Prime edit log release 2.1. Before I dwell into, let me just give you a brief idea. Let me just give you a brief idea on the differences between this Tally Prime release 2.1 and Tally Prime edit log release 2.1. So, what the thing is that in both softwares, be it 2.1 or be it the edit log 2.1, in both softwares, the facility of edit log exists. So in all versions which are earlier to Tally Prime release 2.1, the facility of edit log as such does not exist. Obviously, you can do it by customization. That's a different story. We'll come to it later. But from the accounting software itself perspective, in this version, that is the Tally Prime, the regular version 2.1, the audit trail can be enabled as well as it can be disabled, depending on the administrator. That is what they call, the person who has got all rights basically on the configuration of that company is called an administrator in Tally software. So the administrator has got the rights to enable as well as disable the edit log in Tally Prime release 2.1. However, in Tally Prime, the edit log version, as the description suggests, the edit log once activated is permanent. So even the administrator, that is the person who has got all rights over that company, even the administrator has got no right to disable the edit log. At least that is what the software provider says. However, if you remember, as I had mentioned while I was talking about the representation side, that the audit trail cannot be disabled. The management as well as the auditor, we all are sort of, we all are sort of dependent on the software provider for their view, whether it is permanent or not, whether it can be disabled or not. And mind you, if you think of it from the software provider perspective, whatever they are saying on their websites or on their promotional materials is basically advertisement. So the question arises whether as a management or as a consultant or as an auditor, should we rely on those advertisements which the software providers give, or should we be hiring some expert, maybe the management hiring their own expert, or maybe the auditor seeking the work of its own expert as SA620 as I mentioned earlier, or should we be relying only on management representation SA580? This is something which are questions which the time will tell that how the audit fraternity responds. Okay, now what I'll be doing is basically I'll be covering certain scenarios which we had encountered practically as to what were the issues that we faced and what are the possible solutions to those issues which you can advise to your clients. Technicalities. Scenario 1. So what had happened was, obviously it's a going concern, so it's a running company. They were maintaining their accounts in Tally Prime. They migrated, from a lower version, they came to Tally Prime. Then from Tally Prime, they came to Tally Prime 2.1. And then from 2.1, they migrated to Tally Prime 2.1 edit log. That is what has been mentioned over here. Created or migrated, to Tally Prime edit log. The ultimate destination was Tally Prime edit log. And then again migrated back to Tally Prime. So again, let's view the screenshot. We'll go from the bottom to top. Serial number 1, edit log enabled during company creation. So basically, this is Tally Prime. This is the Tally Prime 2.0. This is not the edit log one. So in this version, the edit log can be enabled as well as disabled. Okay. So edit log was enabled during company creation. Edit log enabled by who? Admin on the 31st of March. Company serial number 2, company data moved from Tally Prime. So what had happened was company data moved from Tally Prime to Tally Prime, the edit log version on the 13th of April 23 at 12:49. Now, ideally speaking, when somebody claims or some software provider claims that the edit log is permanent. So when you think of it that way, when the edit log is permanent, there shouldn't be any option available for it to go from a permanent status again back to a temporary status. Because understand, the edit log version, that is Tally Prime edit log, in your Tally Prime edit log version, the edit log is permanent. But however, if the migration back to Tally Prime 2.1, wherein the edit log is not permanent, if such migration is back to a lower version is possible, how can somebody, from the management side or even at an auditor side, how can somebody claim that the audit trail was permanent? So serial number 3, Tally data moved from Tally Prime edit log, that is the permanent edit log version, back to Tally Prime, which is the temporary edit log version. So this is an issue, a scenario which we sort of encounter. So technicalities, observations. A first observation, data migration and maintenance is possible in a version where the audit trail can be disabled, because in Tally Prime 2.1, the audit trail can be disabled. Okay, whether it is actually disabled or not is a completely different story, but it can be disabled. So the claim that, something was permanent, that comes into question. So in such a case, the auditee, needs to audit, as in the management needs to have similar version of software at all places where the data is stored and accessed. So if in one system, the version is Tally Prime or edit log 2.1, in all systems, wherever, the books of accounts need to be maintained, which is basically at all places of business, wherein, the data needs to be accessed. In all such places, the version should be the same. Currently, the version which is running is Tally Prime 2.1 edit log. So that version needs to be same in all the places. This is something as a consultant to the management, as an auditor, we need to take care of. Auditor also needs to evaluate access rights to data folder. Now, what is a data folder? Okay. This is the data folder. See, users prime desktop, audit trail, edit log, remigrated. Remigrated as in because from 2.1 I had migrated it to 2.1 edit log, and then again I remigrated it, right? So I just wanted to show you. So the access to this folder, this folder wherein this data is mentioned, access to this folder should be restricted for the users of this thing, or else the controls are, the efficiency of controls is a question. So as an auditor, you need to evaluate access rights to the data folder, that 10,002 data folder. So another scenario that we came across. Existing, let's understand what the scenario was. Existing list of entries entered, altered, or deleted. So now we are in the Tally Prime edit log version. As you can see in the screenshot, Tally Prime towards your left-hand side corner, top corner, Tally Prime edit log. Obviously, this is an education version for demonstration purposes. So I'm using the edu version. So now over here, basically on the 1st of April, the 1st of May, multiple transactions had been entered. 2 relating to client 1, 1 relating to salary, 2 relating to stationery, 1 relating to cash, and 1 was deleted. Now, since the edit log was enabled, obviously the deleted transactions also are available to be seen, that some transaction, whether it was deleted or not. Understand, we have seen 2 transactions of stationery over here. One of a debit amount 9,000 rupees, the other of a debit amount 25,000 rupees. Now, what happens is, as I mentioned earlier, since we can, migrate it back to a lower version wherein the audit log can be disabled, what if one of the transactions after disabling the audit log was altered or say deleted? So what happened over here is, we deleted one stationary transaction just for testing purposes. We deleted one stationary transaction, the 25,000 stationary transaction we deleted, and we again remigrated it back to Tally Prime, the edit log version. Okay. Now what happened is, you can still see the deleted transaction, which was anyway deleted in the earlier screenshot. If you see the deleted transaction, which was anyway deleted, it was still visible earlier. It is still visible now. But the stationary transaction of 25,000, which ideally should have been visible as like this, deleted in brackets, that is simply not visible anymore. Vanished, including the audit trail. So what has happened over here is that since the audit trail was disabled, okay, to find out whether any transaction was altered or deleted becomes practically impossible. However, there is one thing which as an auditor, we should, it is like it should be a part of our audit procedures. If you are doing an auditing in Tally software, this should be a part of our audit procedure. And that is, we need to go to the company's master edit log, which is Alt K company edit log. So this is your company, on the left-hand side corner, just besides edit log, edu. We have manage and we have got company. And in that company, we go to an option down, which is the edit log. And over here, we can see that what had actually happened. So basically, after moving the data from edit log to a lower version, that is migrating it back to 2.1, what did we do? We disabled the edit log. That is something which the feature in Prime covered. But when we deleted the transaction after disabling the edit log, the feature did not cover. And then we moved it back from Tally Prime 2.1 to Tally Prime Edit Log 2.1. That is again something which has been covered. So the first thing when you see that the audit log, edit log has been disabled, the audit trail has been disabled. In the guidance note, it is clearly mentioned what to do in such scenarios wherein, the auditor is of the view that it cannot comment whether the audit trail has been put to use throughout the year or not. Okay, I'll just show you this thing live in Tally Prime. How does it work? So basically, Tally Prime edit log version. Okay, in the company, we go to edit log over here, and we can see this activities affecting the edit log. So log enable, then move from Tally Prime, then move again from Tally Prime edit log to back to Tally Prime. We disable the edit log, and from Tally Prime it moved to Tally Prime edit log. Let's come back to the presentation. Now, observations. What has happened over here? Understand. Other than data access to users means that folder wherein that 10,002 data was mentioned, as we saw sometime 5 minutes ago. Other than data access to users, user rights to access data is also another thing that needs to be taken care of, because understand what had happened was a transaction was deleted. So user rights to access data, as in whether a particular user can delete a transaction or not, or whether it can delete or alter a transaction with backdate or not, that is something which needs to be taken care of at an implementation level. Obviously, if it is not implemented, the auditor will report on it accordingly. There is no way for the auditor to find the deleted transaction in the edit log, as I shown you in the screenshots. However, just by viewing the edit logs log, that is, activities affecting the edit log, the auditor can evaluate the efficiency and effectiveness of the audit trail feature. Because if the edit log has been disabled, we can report in our audit reports accordingly. Controls for creating, altering, or deleting backdated entries need to exist. Okay. So now what happens is, as I mentioned in the first point, user rights to access data, user rights to ensure that, they don't alter or create or, delete any entries. They also need to exist. So now how do we take care of those things? We again come back to Tally Prime. Okay. We go to company. Okay. Earlier we were here at edit log. Now we go to user roles. Okay, so user can be a data entry user, obviously, because at an accountant or a supervisor level, what you're basically doing is you're entering your transactions and you're vouching for it. So, based on the documents or evidences that are available, you're not really auditing for it. You just, as an internal control function, you're using it. So what happens is security levels, level of data entry. Okay, we just clicked on enter. I'll once again go in the company. We go to user roles. Under user roles, we go to data entry. And in the data entry, what we do is we go to name of the security level, which is data entry, and use the basic facilities of data entry. Because if we give owner rights, then what happens is they get basically rights to practically everything, which may include even disabling the edit log in case if you're using a Tally Prime, the other version. Okay. Data entry. Days allowed for backdated vouchers. This is where the interesting thing comes up, because then you can very well define whether the person is allowed to enter backdated entries or not. In case if you say 5 days or 10 days or something, so you can always give a control whether whether the data entry person, be it the accountant or anybody, can go for backdated entries, enter transactions or backdated entries or not. Cutoff date for backdated entries, that is basically, say for example, a month end or a year end or something, after which you are just like, no, we don't want to allow any backdated entries. Yes. Disallow, let's take it ahead. Disallow the following facilities. So basically the data entry person, which is the accountant, it cannot view your accounting masters, which is the ledger masters. It cannot view your balance sheet. By the way, this is default, which comes in Tally, right? The reason why I'm showing this is because so that as an implementer, you can understand, as a reviewer, you can understand what would be the risks which are possible. What would be the transactions wherein any disabling or anything which is possible. Company features, cost controls, stock at is full access, and payroll masters and everything. Create, alter, backdated vouchers. We are disallowing backdated vouchers over here. So days, in case if you want to allow, in case if you want to disallow after a certain days. So that thing comes over here. In case you want to absolutely disallow, it will come over here. Let's get back to our PPT. Technicalities. Scenario 3, date of transaction and law. Now, if you remember, the requirement of audit trail as such was that when the transaction has been created, that is entered into the software, and when it has been altered. This when, the question of when was answered by mentioning the date of the transaction. So when the transaction was entered, as in the date, and at what time the transaction was entered. Now, we'll take this screenshot. Now understand, this we had taken a very hypothetical example, obviously, but this was a concern for us from an implementation perspective. Hence, I am mentioning it over here. So if you realize the transaction date on your right hand side corner, the transaction date is 1st April 23, which is the 1st of April 2023. Now over here in the edit log, what it says is, when was it created? On the 1st of April 2020. A transaction dated 1st April 2023. How can it be entered on the 1st of April 2020? This is obviously not an edited screenshot. It is a practical issue. Okay. And then when was it altered? 1st of April 2025. That day has simply not come yet. It will come after 2 years. So how can this thing is possible? How can this thing be possible? And mind you, this is the Tally Prime edit log version. So, this is permanent. So if you look at the screen, the bottom of your screen, look at it. The date which it shows is 1st of April 2025. Now understand what has happened over here. So whatever transactions you record, whatever transactions you alter, the date that it captures is the date of the machine. That is the PC, the work in which it is being done. And that is why you can have such absurd dates and, times which simply don't make sense practically. Observations. Softwares which are not cloud-based may be acquiring date and time from the computer's date and time as its source data. Now, why not cloud-based? Because what happens is, in case of cloud-based softwares or in case of softwares which are software as a service, SaaS softwares, so the date and time which they usually take is the date and time of the server of that software. And usually, the date and time which it takes is the server of that software. And usually in such servers, in case of such softwares wherein they're maintained on servers, the software usually asks you for your location. You must have noticed this thing multiple times. In case of using third-party apps on your phone, multiple times they ask you for your location. So what happens in such cases is that, see, India, since we are Indians and living in India, India is what, like 5:30 GMT, plus 5:30 GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. So they calculate the time on the basis of your location plus or minus GMT, plus or minus wherever their server is located. So in such a case, they will always be in a better position to give you the accurate date and time when a transaction was entered into their software. However, when a software is basically non-cloud based or not really connected to the internet or any network, there is a possibility that it may be any software for that matter. We are obviously referring to Tally Prime, but any software which is desktop based or non cloud based, there is a possibility that it may be acquiring date and time from the computer's date and time. Okay. So what happens is, hence, along with control for backdated entries. Now, mind you, we have understood three things from an auditor's perspective. Firstly, it is data's access, the 10,002 folder. That folder's access to the users, that is the accountants. Okay. Second thing, what we covered was users access to data, as in access relating to backdated entries, as in access relating to alteration and deletion of vouchers, access related to all of that. And now what we are coming is to the third thing, that is controls in relation to backdated. Because what happens is, obviously we took a hypothetical example, but if somebody has to pass a backdated entries, this is a loophole. Okay. So this is also something that we need to take care of. So how do we take care of it? I'll come to it. Also, evaluation of backups may hold increasing importance. Again, as I mentioned, backups is something that needs to be taken daily as per the company law's requirement. So, when you have got a backup and, in that backup, the audit trail is mentioned, you can always compare the two backups and see what has been the change. Okay. Now, practically, how do we take care of it? So if you understand, even in the other two scenarios, I have tried to ensure that practically also you take care of it. Like, for example, restricting users to access the source data folder, that is the 10,002. Or, in this case, what we do is restricting the user of the system, not the user of accounts, the user of the system, restricting users to go to this thing. This is basically your settings. This is your control panel. So if you can restrict the user to access this thing, then this is not really much of an issue. And again, as I mentioned, there is the requirement is such, not tampering with. The requirement is such that if you are to implement it, there is a possibility of relying on work on some expert. Because this is a technical issue which, as a chartered accountant, we may not be in a position to really take care of. Let's take another scenario. No apparent, report of alterations of transactions in the daybook. Now, what is this issue, if I am so to say? What happens over here is that, we go back to Tally Prime. Okay. Now, say, for example, we know for a fact that this transaction has been altered. How do you check whether some transaction has been altered? Alt Q. Okay. So every transaction which has been altered, what happens is that you have to go enter, you have to enter that transaction, and then you have to do an Alt Q. And then after that, you have to see whether, the transaction, the date and the time which has been altered. And for what alteration has been done, you again have to press another enter. So say, for example, in this case, the salary which was earlier debited to be 10,000 rupees, it was later on changed to 5,000 rupees. So the immediate question, from a questioning mind of the auditor, the immediate question which will first come up is that why? Why was the transaction changed from 10,000 to 5,000 rupees? Okay. The other thing which comes up is that for every alteration which has happened, see, remember the guidance, the implementation guide says that the auditor's responsibility is, towards the transactions which have been altered. So the question is, whether we as an auditor, from the scope of work perspective, should this also be a part of the scope of work? Whether a transaction has been altered, so we verify each and every transaction which has been altered, what alterations have been made. Because obviously we would be applying our, materiality levels. Whether certain transaction is material enough to be vouched or the alterations to be seen. Why? And I don't understand whether the management would be in a position to answer or give reasons for practically all alterations. Over here, since, for demonstration purposes, what we are really referring to is just one transaction. But there may be multiple such transactions which are happening. So care needs to be taken even on those points. Now, again, as I mentioned, like 10,000, 5,000 rupees. Like why? Why is this thing the way it is? Observations. There may be multiple such transactions which are to be altered. The alterations can be huge, huge in number. So how do we take care of all of those? A really very important question which, can come up. Hence, for the auditor, it may be a difficult task to actually view and evaluate the individual alterations and transactions above materiality level. And the other problem is that should the auditor ask for those alterations? So now what we'll do is, I'll just give you a brief idea on what has been actually being done. So if we go to, say, for example, Tally Prime Edit Log, this company, what happens is if we are to create a new company, say, for example, we create a demo company 2. Since this is the edit log version, there is no question of whether to apply edit log or not, because in this case, the edit log is anyways already applicable. So when you create a new company, mailing address, new company, state, say, for example, Maharashtra, control user access to company data, say, for example, we give a yes, administrator. This was what I was referring to in one of my initial slides, because administrator is something that kind of controls the company's configurations and everything. Yes. So what happens is this is how a company can be configured. Okay, company demo to admin. Okay, and then it just sort of asks for everything. We'll just skip that part. No. Now, if we want to create users, so what we do is we go to users and passwords. Demo 2, this is the company that we just created right now. User roles, which would be data entry. Username is, say, for example, accountant A. Accountant A. Password, we can just give a regular password. Then there would be another data entry person, say, for example, a supervisor. Supervisor. Password is again end of this. So once again, I'll repeat. How did we go over here? We went to company. In company, we went to users and passwords. Okay. And in users and passwords, obviously the demo company 2 that we created right now, we defined the user roles, that is the data entry user role. And in the data entry user role, it is accountant A and the password. That is how we created. Now, this is for the Tally Prime edit log version. So what if it is, the regular Tally Prime without the edit log facility? So how do we go into that? So say, for example, we go to Tally Prime. Let it just open. Continue in education mode. We create a new company. So over here, the first thing in the center of the screen, it should strike you. Enable edit log, yes or no. Why? Because there is an option to disable. So first this thing will ask, Tally will ask whether to enable edit log or no. In case of some people, once after this session, if you try and you see that this question, this point is not coming up, enable edit log or not. So what you do is you go to configure and you set this thing, set edit log applicability, yes. So once you say yes to this thing, and the next question comes is give user access controls. Obviously, because in the edit log applicability, you have to report, you have to maintain records of who has entered the transaction. So who is the user, right? So user access control, yes. So once yes is done, or say, for example, over here, we create a company demo 3. State Maharashtra. Input can be anything. Enable edit log, yes. Any control user access to company data, yes. Name of the administrator. The administrator is that person who has got the rights, the absolute rights over that data. We created a new company and then a demo 3. So, right now we'll give it the administrator rights, component. Again, even in this company, this is the Tally Prime version, not the edit log version, but the process to create users remains the same. We go to users and passwords and we create a user. Now, till this point of time, what all we have seen, just to give you a quick recap, in Tally Prime as well as the Tally Prime edit log version, because in both the cases, the steps are the same. We created a company, okay? We saw to enable edit log applicability, no or yes. In case if this thing is not available, then what do? We go to configure and we set the edit log applicability to yes and user access controls to yes. Okay. What other things which we saw was this edit log functionality, wherein if you remember, we could see when the edit log was enabled, when the data was migrated from one software to another. Let me show you that. Edit log. So where we could see that when the data was migrated from a lower version to a higher version, then again migrated back to a lower version, then the edit log was disabled and then again enabled, and we migrated back to a higher version. So that we saw in the edit log. Third thing what we saw was users and passwords. As in mentioning the users, as in who should be the user, say for example, accountant or accountant A or B or whatever. Then there would be some supervisor or then there would be some manager or whatever. That is something which we saw because we need to give names to those users who would be using the or who would be entering and altering the transactions in. Then another thing which we saw earlier was user roles, wherein we saw that what are the what is the allowability and the disallowability of a user who is categorized under a data entry person, that is the accountant or the manager. Use basic facilities of data entry, and then disallow the following facilities, that is full access to account masters, balance sheets, and all of that. That is also we saw. We also saw that we can allow backdated vouchers or disallow backdated vouchers using this functionality. Now let's see, how does the audit trail actually look like, if we are to see from a daybook perspective. So what we do is we go to display more reports over here. Then in display more reports, we go to daybook. Okay. Then in this daybook, we go to basis of values. So now, as such, it is showing report for all vouchers, which is altered as well as non-altered. What do we mean by altered? That is a voucher which was created, but due to some or the other reason, it was edited later. So that is altered. Non-altered means obviously those vouchers which were just created. Include deleted vouchers? Well, yes. Just a minute. Yes. So type of vouchers, all vouchers. Okay, in case if you want accounting entries or inventory entries or whatever. But as we discussed earlier, inventory as well as accounting, they both form a part of books of accounts, and thereby edit log is applicable to both types of entries. Okay. So like this. Okay. So what has happened over here is that certain transactions which were deleted, simply deleted. Okay. And this was altered. So if we enter, say for example, salary, if we enter, then what do? We do an Alt Q. If you want to see Alt Q comes over here. Just a minute. Related reports, edit log, Alt Q. Apologies. Alt Q. So when we do an Alt Q, the detail comes into picture. Deleted. So if a transaction was deleted, say for example, previous record was this. So there was a payment in cash to salary 5,000 rupees, and it was simply deleted. And now again, as I had mentioned earlier, as an auditor, a question may come up. Why was the transaction deleted? So if we ask as an auditor, if we ask starting whys to everything, imagine the scope of work that will be taken ahead. Okay. This was another thing that I thought I should be, sort of ensuring. be taken care of. Okay. Now, same ways in case of Tally Prime also, whatever, the company, say for example, if we do a demo company, maybe, just do a demo company. This is the Tally Prime. Oh dear. So now this is where the issues arise, because if we don't know the passwords and everything, we won't be able to access the data over here. You see, from the accountant standpoint, we don't have access to balance sheets, profit and loss, because if you remember, the rights that we have given to the data entry person, which is the accountant, the rights we have given is only to enter transactions and view certain things. We have not given the right to view balance sheets, profit and loss, and all of that. So display more reports, day book, and over here, say for example, this thing. Now we do an alt Q. It was created by admin, and then someday later the admin kind of edited it. So all these things are also there, which exist. Now in this case, if you see, the voucher number was changed. So again, should we question this? There are multiple questions for which it would be difficult to find answers, but for me, as a person, I need to enlighten you with everything, with every particular possibility that this is there, this is there, this is there. Not necessarily everything would be having answers. That depends on your professional judgment as to what to do when you encounter such type of situations. We take it ahead. Okay. Now, another question which may arise to many people is that what if the accounting is being done in a software which is below Tally Prime 2.1 or in an earlier version or something. So let's take the example of, say, for example, Tally ERP. I just have a company which is open over here. And in this company, there are multiple utilities which are available in the market. So what do? Is they basically ensure that audit trail has been maintained. Obviously, you cannot say for sure or with guarantee whether the audit trail can be enabled or disabled, or it cannot be disabled or something, but at least an audit trail can be maintained. So there are multiple utilities available in the market. I'll just just for demonstration purposes, I'll show you one utility. Again, we'll go to it the same way as we did it with Tally Prime, that is display day book. So say for example, there are so many these transactions which have been entered on the 30th of March. Okay. Now, there is this button, audit trail, edit log. So what happens is when you click on the button, it shows that entry mode. So, the transaction was created. So who had created that transaction? Accountant. What date? On the 30th of March, at what time? 2:16, maybe at night, that person must be working. Whatever. Amount was this. Then it was altered by the supervisor. The amount changed. Then it was again altered by the supervisor. The amount changed. So there are such utilities which are available in the market. So what happens is, all your transactions, basically this is the day book for one day. So if you do a complete year, on the day book. So if we do a complete year, say for example, from the 1st of April, if we mention the 1st of April over here, 822, and then, the 31st of March. So whatever transactions have been entered, every transaction, the audit trail would be visible. Now, this will help you to ensure that, at least the transactions which form a part of the books of accounts, an audit trail exists for those transactions. Again, a question may arise as to what happens if somebody deletes a transaction or anything like that. There's a pretty much possibility. So in such utilities, there is always an option of a recycle bin. Okay. Now, what does a recycle bin do? So basically, say for example, let's we go to a day book. Now this Adiyat Enterprises entry, we simply decide to delete that entry. So how do you delete an entry? You do an alt D. So it does not delete, it just says go to recycle bin. Now if we go to recycle bin over here, see the Adiyat Enterprises entry is available over here because it does not actually delete an entry. It just removes it from the books of accounts and kind of keeps a record of it elsewhere. It makes it an optional voucher basically. So even again over here also the trail is available wherein as to who has done what, the transactions. Okay. So there are multiple such utilities available in the market which help you to maintain your audit trail, even in a scenario wherein the version of Tally or any other accounting software doesn't really allow. Okay, another thing which may come up, and I would like to cover that as well, is that how to give user access rights to these versions of Tally. The versions wherein audit trail in itself is not available. So we go to company info. This is all step 3. Company info, and then we go to security control. And in security control, again, security and user access. This was something that we had seen earlier also in the Tally Prime, just that the user interface was different. So what do we do? The security level, owner, data entry provider, and everything. All of these things exist over here as well. Type of security, data entry, and then we see whether full access is to be given or not to be given, and everything and everything. And then the password policy, this is a company specific thing. Okay. I presume there would be, before the session, I was actually presuming there would be a good understanding of queries. And that is why I have tried to sort of limit the session over here. Let's see if we have any queries. Moderators, please see whether there are any, what are the queries and everything. So we'll take it up, those queries.
Yes. Thank you for the wonderful session. I'm just working out. I'll just check the queries. Give me 2 minutes.
Sure.
I'll just take up the first question.
Yes, yes.
See, whichever questions are already covered in the session, I will not be looking at them. We have a question that how shall the user for auditor be created and maintained, as auditor would be passing some entries at their end? Will the entries passed at auditor's place and then mailing the data to incorporate there in their office? How will those entries passed be look like?
Yes. See, first things first, let's understand, as an auditor, I am not supposed to do accounting. As an auditor, if there is some non-compliance or something, from an advisor, say for example, a Schedule 3 transaction, like depreciation, Schedule 3. So the company may follow their own ways of depreciating an asset or something. But however, as an auditor or as a consultant of company law, we would be like, please follow Schedule 3 and this is how it will go. That will come under the consulting side of things. So then over there, the thing is that we are consultants, we're not auditors. So the user is a consultant. We would be advising their accountants, their accounting team to put the transaction accordingly, and the user would be the accountant. How would the data look like? See, understand over here. That is why I, let me just go back to that screenshot. Users. Okay. Just give me a minute. Display more reports. This is the demo company, right? Yes. Paybook. This salary thing. Alt Q. Over here, what will happen is the name of the user will change. So if user A has created the entry, so it would be user A. If it has been altered by somebody else, say for example user B, the B would be mentioned over here, and somebody else has done some other changes, it would be C. Same goes for the utilities which are available in private market. The same way it works. Say for example audit trail, yes. So it has been created by the accountant, the supervisor has done something to it, some alterations, the admin has done something to it, and so on and so forth. That is how, even after restoration of data, yes, because the data remains the same, right? So even after restoration of data, this is how it will continue. Yes, it will be. Next question.
Yes, Samkit, please.
Hi, next Ankit. So
Yes,
we
yes,
have another query,
yes,
whether making entries periodically, like
yes.
once in a month, is objectionable or wrong from auditor point of view.
If you ask me, the way this thing is, over here, the real question comes is compliance of other laws and compliance of accounting standards.
Mhm.
So, because what happens is, as far as backdated entries or anything else are concerned from accounting standards perspective, if it does not affect, okay, and from, say, for example, other laws, as I had given the example of GST. Now, what happens over here is, let me just take GST for an example. The GST law, for creation of an invoice, what does it say? At the, a registered person supplying taxable goods shall, at or before or at the time of removal of goods from the factory, shall create an invoice. And the invoice shall contain the date of its issue. Okay. Now what happens is, you would be creating an invoice in something else. And then, probably after a month, you would be just entering or dumping those transactions into Tally or importing those transactions into Tally. So in such a case, are you complying with other laws? The answer is yes. You created, like, you issued an invoice when it was supposed to be issued under GST law. And that
Okay.
shouldn't be much of an issue.
Thank you. We have another query. What do you mean by daily data? Data backup daily. We will be having the original source file. Other than this, you are referring that we should maintain the data backup each day.
Okay, good question though. So basically, just a minute, I'll go back to that thing. Yes. So, just by going by the plain explanation of things, again, let's be very clear, the term backup is not defined in company. So when you say, what do you mean by backup? Okay, it can be anything which the company calls, like your auditee, which the company calls it to be backup, because backup is not defined anywhere. Okay, daily, it should be maintained on a daily basis. If we understand the reason behind or the intention of the lawmaker behind, because in case of income tax also, many times high courts have given judgments on the basis on what the intention of the lawmakers was. So we'll take it to company law also. The intention of the lawmaker over here is to provide for the fact that every day there is some backup. And by layman understanding of the backup, it means that something over and above your regular data. This is what I feel. Now, the question really arises, I'll actually extend this question further. That is, what type of backup to be maintained? Should we be maintaining, daily backups as in 365 days ka 365? That is what is required. Or should we be maintaining one backup which is updated every day? That is nowhere defined. That's unfortunate. That depends on the management policies.
So what would be your opinion with respect to that? Which option should we go ahead with?
From data management perspective, personally, I feel that one backup per day. Obviously, the servers and everything, you'll be requiring huge storages for this thing. But one backup per day is something that I, sort of recommend. And even over here, there are utilities which are available in the market. I'll just give you a demonstration of one of the utility. So how does it work is that, say, for example, in the utility, I'll take ERP. Okay. We go to configure. Okay, there is this utility which keeps its backup on your Google Drive. That is why it is mentioned cloud, because it kind of keeps its backup on the Google Drive. Okay. So over here, you give the path. I'm sure it is small, so it would be difficult to, sort of see, but the folder is desktop audit trail backup. So we go to that folder, desktop audit trail. This is your desktop audit trail, and in that we go to backup. So what happens is, every time you close your Tally or you shut your company, every time it creates a backup. So just before this session, I had closed my Tally. So it created a backup. When did it create a backup? 15:12. That is at 3 p.m. and 12 minutes. So there are multiple such utilities available in the market. And if you're not going by the utility thing, then obviously there's something called as a WinZip or a WinRAR. You just converted it to a RAR file and store it somewhere, be it on cloud, be it on your local systems. Yes, but it should be stored in India. So if you're going for cloud, the cloud should have a physical server in India, because that is what the requirement of the law is, that should be kept in a server physically located in India.
Sanket.
Then we have another question. If data is migrated from Tally Prime edit log to Tally
Yes.
Prime,
The
then how
regular
to
Tally Prime,
report
okay.
this in our audit report? I think you raised the question, now people are asking the solution.
So again, for all such questions, basically the guidance note is the holy grail, and the guidance note covers this type of scenarios. So basically, when somebody is asking this question, the scenario that is covered is that the edit log was disabled, because we as an auditor, we cannot vouch with surety that the edit log was enabled in a software version wherein it can be disabled. We cannot vouch for it. It is not our, it cannot be our responsibility. So what happens over here is auditors' opinions. Just a minute. This is wait a second. This comes under. I'll just have to refer to it once. Model this thing reporting that they had given. Illustrative wordings for reportings. Yes. I'll just copy it. Illustrative wordings for reporting. So all such questions wherein how to report and what to report, you'll get your answers over here. So in case if the audit trail did not have a feature, so we'll have to mention that instances wherein it was not featured. Okay, for modified reporting, the audit trail feature was disabled, because understand, when you migrated to a lower version, you don't know whether it was enabled throughout the year or not. So the illustrative wordings are over here. That is, we cannot vouch whether the audit trail has been maintained or not. However, the management representation states that it has been maintained, because obviously, it is on them whether they want to represent it that way or not. Yes, next question.
Okay. If a voucher is deleted, will the system renumber the voucher, or the deleted voucher will be missing?
Yes. Now over here, what happens is you go to your voucher types. Say, for example, this is a payment voucher, right? Say we are altering the voucher type, which is payment. I'll give you direct demonstration. So method of vouching over here, voucher numbering is manual. So the answer to the question is what has been the configuration over here. If it is automatic, it would be renaming it accordingly. If it is manual, it will ask the user to enter the voucher number. That is how it goes. And in case of deleted vouchers, if you go see whether it is under edit log or not is a different story. In case of deleted vouchers, the thing is it renames it, renumbers it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anik,
Yes.
one question is interesting. As Tally Prime edit log uses date from computer itself,
Yes.
that I cannot confirm, but if it uses from computer itself,
Yes.
whether this type of audit trail is reliable from auditor perspective.
That is why I said that to the user of that system, you have to consult your IT personnel to ensure that the user cannot access the control panel.
Okay, but IT side also.
So what happens is that is why in the thank you slide that will come later on, I have mentioned that it is not about audit anymore. We are multitasking ninjas. So we have to coordinate with the Indian accounting standards or the accounting standards. You have to coordinate with the company law, the GST, the income tax, and in income tax, even ICDS as well, in case if we are the tax auditors. Okay. We have to coordinate now with the IT people as well. To elaborate this question further, this is the backend. See, if you understand, like this is basically the code of it, but just see these two words, machine date and machine time.
Okay.
So it is taking the machine date and the machine time. Machine date is basically whatever is mentioned over here.
Okay.
And I can obviously, since this is a Zoom meeting, I cannot really show it live, but it is very easy to change the date and time settings. All you have to do is just set time
Correct.
automatically off.
And people are using in different scenarios. So
But
on that top up thing, so
yes,
when we go for audit, we would be going, let's say, in the month of May or June, right?
yes, yes,
And again, to confirm that that control panel they couldn't access during the audit period, that is
yes, yes, yes,
financial year, let's say
yes,
last year.
yes.
It's again something would come out how? Matlab, today I
See,
might do a test check or random or surprise check.
yes, yes, yes. Exactly, exactly. You bullseye, actually, I should say. That is why, I kind of mentioned that SA 620 in my slide. Because if you read the implementation, that the implementation guide doesn't even refer to SA 620.
Correct, correct.
But the thing is, this thing, what you questioned, this is something which an expert and a true blue IT personnel would be able to tell whether when was that user created. User as in user, not of Tally, user of the system.
Okay.
The user over here which comes a user PC, say this is user PC, right? So user of this system, this is user PC, that is the name of the user. So when like what rights have been given to that person and everything, it will be a part of his thing, because as an auditor, or even from a system implementation perspective, it is very Tally implementation perspective or any other accounting software implementation perspective, it is very difficult to comment on that thing.
So as a IT, they have a history of the user, right? I mean, just trying to take a
I
hypothetical
understand.
situation, like for 12 months, the user could have access control panel. And now
Yes.
during when the audit is being conducted, वो
They
बंद कर दिया.
disable it.
हाँ,
So that is why what happens is, we have to, like, as an auditor, we'll have to hire our expert.
okay.
Okay. And even then, see, obviously, but if I tell you long story short, in case of MSMEs, there would be a possibility as to the question of the operating system itself.
Okay.
Whether
Bit
the
technical.
Windows, okay, I'll explain. So what happens is, there are these software providers, okay, vendors, who will sell you the software, whether, it is Windows 10 or Windows 11 or something, as a user,
Okay.
normal IT user. How do you ensure that the Windows copy is genuine? When you start dwelling deep into it, there's practically no end. And it is very, see, that is why one of the reasons why, I was also stressing on the word tampering is this only, that there is no end. If you actually start thinking with an analytical mind, see, the auditor is a watchdog, not a bloodhound. But if you use your analysis, where do you end?
Fair.
Yes.
Seeing next question.
Yes.
Just a minute, please. If accounts are maintained on blockchain technology platform, does it require separate audit trail option?
Can you see to the answer, the person who has asked this question? Okay. Blockchain technology, I understand, because, every transaction, everything that has happened is a timestamp. And usually that timestamp happens from, various locations. So now over here, another question will come up, which I'll ask later. Okay. But initially, what the first question which I would ask is that, can you view that timestamp? If yes, then there is no need for an audit trail, because that is what the audit trail means. And we don't really have a statutory definition of the word audit trail. Okay. Now to elaborate this question further, even in case of blockchain technologies, the thing is, it is worldwide. So the question arises as to timestamp, and then you have to compare it with GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. That is how, from the reporting country perspective, which is India, we'll come to know as to what the exact time was in IST of that transaction.
Okay. Thank you. Sanket.
Just as I'm checking if there are any new questions.
Okay.
I think there are no other new questions. I think 60-70% you've already covered in the presentation, which were on the
Ju-
common parlance.
Just
And
one more.
Sure,
Is
yeah,
there any limit that one transaction can be altered or changed for limited number of times, or it can be changed, say, more than 20 times?
well, in my testing, I haven't come across any limit.
Okay.
Yes. And even from the statutory perspective, there is no limit as such. That say for example, any law from whatever I know, I don't see any law saying that there's a limit on the transactions, on the number of times a transaction can be on.
All right, sir. Thank you for the valuable inputs. As there are no questions, anything that you would like to mention as a concluding remark, or should we request Sri Litesh Gada to offer a well-deserved vote of thanks? Your last thoughts.
Yes. As I said, they are expecting us to be multitasking ninjas.
Perfect. Thank you, Henrik.
Most
Over to you, Litesh.
Thanks, Henrik, for wonderful presentation. It was very insightful and kind of you can say need of the hour, where we are going to start with the audit season, so to say. So that is going to be really helpful for our young chartered accountants who are practicing in the audit field. So a big thank you for explaining this technical subject, which is not kind of our core competency. We are hardcore accounting guys, auditing guys, not technology guys. But you have kind of, in a way, explained this topic in a very lucid manner, in a very simple manner, so that all our professional fellows will be able to understand. And I'm sure they have a lot of things to take away from this presentation. And this 1.5 hour of your presentation is going to help them in next 6 months, at least in the next audit season for sure. So thank you for this presentation. A big thanks to the core committee which has been supporting the women and young members excellence team. Preeti Ben, Shri Ajay Chachadji, both are senior council members at the Central Council. So big thanks to them as well. Thank you, Hiral and Sankit, for the moderation of this webinar in a very simple manner, trying to dig out all the possible knowledge from Henrik and kind of trying to address all the possible queries which were there, bombarded to you guys from the audience. Thank you, Vidisha, for the introduction of Henrik. Thanks to the tech team. And finally, last but not the least, thanks to all the participants in the webinar who have patiently been there throughout the webinar from the beginning. Hope you have a lot of takeaways from this webinar. Thank you, and please join on for our upcoming webinars as well. Thank you.
Thank you.